So welcome to the Secure Dynamics TechCast. With me, I have two former guests. I have Marnie Wilking, who is this time I'm going to get the title right, Head of Security and Technology Risk Management at Wayfair. Yes?
Yes.
All right. And Mike Manrod, who's the CISO at Grand Canyon Education. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Ashwin. Good to be here with you, Marnie.
Nice to see you too. Thank you.
So the focus this time in this short 10-minute discussion is really on the K through 12 cybersecurity education, right? I'm going to start off with this whole concept of deperimeterization. And I was just thinking to myself, from a school perspective, like where does the perimeter, if at all, lie today, right? In terms of school is at home, you could be in your home and if I'm a student and my laptop, my Chromebook goes bust, I go on my parents' laptop and then maybe hopping on to a friend's Wi-Fi network if you're doing a collab or something together. So the question is how or who has responsibility of understanding what the school's cybersecurity perimeter zone is? And number two is, even if you figure that out, that could change literally on an hourly basis, right? So how does somebody even grapple with this? Why don't we start with you, Marnie?
Yeah, and so I'll actually add to that as well. It's not just a school problem. There are parents who may not have extra laptops or desktops in the house. And so from a corporate standpoint, we have to realize that a lot of parents may need to allow their kids to use their work laptops to do those classes, right? Mm-hmm. So it's definitely, it creates a whole new problem. I think schools had to pivot in the same way corporations had to pivot early on, which was, used to be that, okay, everybody's in the classroom, everybody's in the school, we can kind of keep the perimeter in the school, and they can't do that anymore. And we all sort of had to contend with that. I do think K through 12 has that added layer of complexity of you've got, students logging in, parents logging in, and trying to complete work and collaborate and use those same resources. So I think as far as whose responsibility it is, it's all about education, really. Mm-hmm. And so I think schools have their work cut out for them in understanding how to educate teachers, how to educate students, how to educate parents. There are a lot of good resources out there, but I think that's the first place that they need to really understand and start is how do we make sure everybody understands that this is really not the school's issue to try to solve by ourselves. We really need everybody's help in understanding what the scope is and how do we help those parents and those teachers who may not have that understanding and background, how to avoid phishing and how to help kids who may have had an issue like that.
Mike, your thoughts?
Well, I think that's spot on. I mean, it's definitely, if we try to look at problems like this as an isolated, hey, let's throw it over the wall to the school. Hey, let's throw it over the wall to the parents. It clearly goes nowhere. And obviously there's a parallel to this problem in the corporate setting as well. But I feel like whether you're looking corporate or school-based, one of the first things to solve for are managed versus unmanaged devices. Mm-hmm. And depending on which category we branch into, there's approaches that have been around and evangelized and advocated for a long time, but sometimes we're back burner, or maybe we'll implement it, but we don't really put a lot of thought onto it. All right, great, it's there, we check the box. There are some technologies that have been on the periphery, now that the perimeter is gone, now come to the forefront, because the perimeter is either your application or it's every host. And it's really both. So once you bifurcate into managed and unmanaged devices, if it's managed devices you're dealing with, then very much it becomes an agent-based solution. You're accountable for that device. You're accountable for what it does. It could be BYOD, fully managed or partially managed, or it could be a corporate device. But either way, the key comes down to agents that move technologies we used to keep at the perimeter down to the endpoint to make sure we have a perimeter on every endpoint. So things like URL filtering, malware sandboxing, things that a lot of organizations could maybe take for granted, well, our people don't travel much, they don't leave much, or we only need to protect the mobile workforce. Well, no, now that's everybody. Then on the unmanaged, I feel like the technology there that's been around and evolving for quite some time, but now is essential, is this zero trust piece.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it involves with having like a partially managed device too, right? Like maybe there's an access agent, a certificate, something that you deploy on the device if it's a really high trust application. For students attending class online, if they're on unmanaged devices, it obviously won't be that, but maybe some zero trust type things to identify speed limit violations, do step up prompts, multi-factor, these types of things.
And I think it starts even a little bit farther back from that and educating. So the people who need to figure out how to manage those devices are the school district's IT departments, who often don't have a CISO or a lot of security resources and are trying to figure this out on their own. And so, I mean, I would recommend the first step is school districts should work with their cities and make sure that they're part of the MSI-SAC, the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center. We've all been dealing with additional ransomware and phishing and things like that. The increase on ransomware on schools nearly doubled in the second half of last year. So it's definitely a problem there. So helping those IT directors and whoever they've got helping them from a security standpoint get better educated, get the information, get the support from their cities that they're supporting, the counties that they're supporting, and understanding how to do an assessment and look at what the gaps are, and then use that to get the funding from the school boards in the cities to help make sure that they've got those things in place and can understand what's managed and not managed and put the right tools in place.
So that leads me to my last question. Again, I'll start with you, Marnie, which is just going by that thread, which is needing to understand the risk and be able to go and ask the right sets of resources. If I'm the head of the school district and somebody comes and let's say the head of technology comes and starts talking to me about, hey, we could be subject to ransomware attack, I have problem getting to figure out whether I need to go hybrid mode for next year or not. I have lowered attendance, which means I have less budget. Teachers are leaving the county because it's too expensive. So I have so many things on my head. What best practice have you seen about the directors of technology who are also trying to raise the bar when more quote unquote real life issues are being faced by the school admins?
Yeah, that's a great question, a good point. The resources that they have available to them are not always the resources that we have from a corporate standpoint. But on the other hand, I will say that the request for budget and prioritizing kind of stays the same. I really recommend those IT directors from a school district standpoint start with the NIST-CSF, and again, work with their city partners on how to understand what the NIST-CSF does, but implementing it at a fairly basic level doesn't take a lot of time. And then leveraging that to identify where those gaps are and where they're missing on some of the basic block and tackle things like patching and phishing training and using multi-factor authentication. And then one of the things I've seen work, particularly in the Arizona area, is having those school districts sort of pool their prioritization and say, okay, if we all need anti-malware, maybe we all go to the same anti-malware provider and come at it as one group, as opposed to each of us trying to negotiate our own pricing. And I think the vendors have been pretty open to that, particularly because they understand that this is an area of need. It's an area that doesn't have a lot of money. And frankly, some of the kids that are, working in the IT department doing those internships may become customers later. So it's a win-win, I think, for the vendors to really partner with school districts to make sure they're getting what they need.
Great. Final thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I think you really said it very well, Marty. I mean, I think alignment across multiple districts are definitely going to provide the scale. I think it's really wise to bring the cities in. You get support. If you don't have the resources, get the support from those who do and are willing to help. I really think that it's a maturity model, right? Tying back to the CSF point, I mean, I love MITRE ATT&CK. There's a lot of good frameworks out there that can kind of break down how to approach this. But I feel like you have to move through iterative phases of maturity. You know, there's no point getting to advanced threat hunting and forensics if you haven't deployed basic things like email filtering, antivirus, firewall. So I feel like using the frameworks to properly prioritize the phases of evolution with the goal of moving through all of them, but moving through them in the right order, starting with the most fundamental and foundational, and then working up to the most advanced competencies over time.
Got it. Great conversation. Again, thanks, Marnie. Thanks, Mike, for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.